Hey, Team Healthy. I'm so pleased to be with you here today. Again, got a nice group already that's assembled here in the live chat. I know many of you are watching us on, what am I supposed to say? Tape delayed? Because it's not tape, digital delay, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. And then, if those of you who want to join us live, you have our time that we meet every week. So glad to have you here. I'm just really pleased just to be here. Period. We're having such a beautiful day here in Waco, Texas. Okay, I got today. We're going to be zeroing in on some questions that have to do with breaking away from that narcissist, and we're going to talk about how that's it's not necessarily an easy thing. A couple of items here before we get going. I'm going to let you know just a little insider information. On February the 13th, so I believe that would be 4 weeks from next Monday, we're going to have a brand new webinar. Now, these are different from my classes. The webinar is a 90-minute deal, and it's much more affordable. It's $45 as opposed to whatever the. Oops, sorry about that. Um, whatever the classes are. But just know it's going to be about covert narcissism and post traumatic stress. So keep your eye out on that. We're going to get some promo stuff out on that fairly quickly. And by the way, I noticed that some of you are asking or talking about the classes that I have. If you have the webinars that you receive, or if you go deep into the full classes, feel free to share those with anybody that you would want to, because they're yours. You can do whatever you want. I noticed some of you mentioned that you're in different study groups, or you may have family members. So that can help you kind of spread it out, and maybe some you can even defray some of the cost on that too. So just know that we can do that. One more thing too. Some of you have already done this. There's one from Belgium right there. Let us know where you're from. I haven't asked you to do that lately, but let us know where you're from, because it's so cool to see our worldwide spread here, and I want you to be able to enjoy that as well. So put that down there on your comment section and all, and we would like to know that. Okay, today we're going to be talking about what it's like when you try to get away from that narcissist, when you break free. And we're going to recognize that there are two different ways that you can break free from that narcissist. One is just physically just getting away and having nothing more to do with that. We call that the no contact way of doing things. Sometimes that's not entirely possible. So psychologically, you'll need to still break away, even if physically you may be in their presence. Psychologically, you can still have your own separate and distinct identity, and that's such an important thing, because one of the things that narcissists want to do is they want to empty you of yourself, and they want to fill you with them, and we're not going to let that happen. The reason you have the distinct personality that you have is because that's what you're intended to be, as opposed to, well, I've got to be a mini version of that narcissistic person. Okay, now I know we go with questions, but I do have a comment here that I want to zero in on. It was just one of these clever things that somebody wrote. I'm going to share this with the people on our live feed today. This person says, it's like they're wearing a yucky coat, and then they want you to wear it instead. So it's like narcissists, and it's kind of interesting that we can take the metaphor and say, well, yeah, their exterior, their coat is all yucky, and so it's like, here, have some of my yuck. That's what they want to do, and they want to make you out to be every bit as dysfunctional as them, because and then they turn around and blame you for being dysfunctional. Go figure. So let's just kind of dive right into it today, and we have multiple situations here where people are talking about the need to break free, whether it's mentally or physically, from that narcissistic person. Um, this first question comes from someone who's having to deal long term with parents who have apparently been gaslighting this individual for a long time. This person says, Dr. C, what if your narcissistic parents have run a smear campaign against you for years as a daughter after removing you from the family, all because they cannot forgive you for something you did over 35 years ago? So we have a situation. All right. So let's say something happened at age 20. I don't know. And so this person may be around 55 years old. That we'll just kind of assume something like that. They were 15 and now they're 50 years old. And there was a problem that was there. And so the narcissistic parents have basically said, well, then that being the case, we don't want you around. And so now, this many years deep into it, 35 years later, you realize, and they're still saying ugly things about you to whoever they want to say. What do you do? Because they can't forgive you for something that happened 35 years ago. Now, obviously, I don't know the nature of what happened and how they felt hurt, or if they were actually legitimately aggrieved or not. I just don't know. It's not put in here. 35 years is a long time. And there comes a point, particularly when we're talking about family, when if somebody has made some adjustments, then let's talk about what those adjustments are. There have been so many times in my therapy practice when somebody would come in with a situation very similar to what this person is about, and they say, "Well, they won't forgive me. Something happened, and I just can't receive forgiveness." But my comment is, well, whether they can forgive you or not, at some point you get to act like a forgiven person. Okay. Take that upon yourself, and whatever wrong was there, forgive yourself. Now, I'm going to guess that if this was 35 years ago, how many of you 35 years ago, obviously you're a whole lot younger than you are now, how many of you were capable of making bad decisions or miscalculations, or you had some youthful indiscretion or something of that nature? And the answer is, oh, it just kind of goes with the turf, doesn't it? There are so many times when you can make mistakes early on in your life. And then as you age and the decades and 35 years in this case have passed, that you can look back and say, boy, did I need to do some growing up. And in the interim time, I have been doing some growing up. Now, some people, from your deep past, have never changed. And I'm hoping that this person who's asking the question is not one of those. But when it comes to the point where you realize this many years later, you're still being spoken about in a very poor way, it's no longer about you. It says far more about who that person is and what their pathology is than it does about who you are and whatever the event was that's there. And so when you ask the question, why can't they just give it up? At this point, it's just a bad question. Well, the reason is because they're highly narcissistic and they have to maintain their own superiority. And when it comes to forgiveness, narcissists have really short memories, as if they don't have anything to forgive. The better question is, okay, knowing that these individuals are still at it 35 years deep into it, and maybe some other people believe it, and if that's the case, then those people who are joining them in their judgment of you probably don't know you very well at all, particularly at this phase in your life. Your better question is, well, what's going to be my identity from this point forward? You can't do anything about something that's a 35-year-old trend like that. um, and it's pathetic that some folks can just hold on and hold on and hold on, and at some point the issue is no longer the issue. It's all about them being committed to hate. It's about them being committed to anger, them being committed to false superiority. And so know what you're dealing with. And so the question is not anymore, what can I do to get them off my back? There they are. The question is, moving forward and having experienced what I have experienced, what am I learning from all of this, and how am I going to make my proper adjustments? And if they never do, then that's their loss. And I'm hoping you're going to be able to move forward. So when we talk about moving beyond that narcissist influence, one of the things that's going to be necessary is to remember, many times a narcissist lousy, dysfunctional, improper attitudes or interpretations are permanent, and they don't grow, they don't have insight, they don't have empathy, and they need somebody in their world, and in this case it can be you, to be an idiot so that they can say, and I'm not. And it's like, okay, if that's what you want to do, and you want to put me in the role of you're a useful idiot, you go right ahead. But I'm not going to play my end of that role anymore. Maybe 34 years ago, it would still have been a pertinent question, but this deep into it, not going to do it. So you accept the fact that that's where they are, and then you define yourself separately. Okay. Um, Another person, and this goes all the way back, let's say, to a beginning point of a relationship. This person asked the question, what makes it so difficult for some of us to get out of relationships the minute we see it? Okay. Now, it could be that in certain scenarios, you may just be introduced, being you've just been introduced to a strongly narcissistic individual, and you just see it right away. Other times, it may be that you don't see the narcissism for some time. In the case, let's say, of a covert narcissist who's quite good at, hang on a second, quite good at making positive impressions, positive false impressions. So, what makes it so difficult for us to get out of these relationships? One of the problems, and I say this in a polite kind of way, that many of us can have when we engage with narcissists is you can think too much like a normal person. Okay. And you want to apply your sense of normalcy to an abnormal set of circumstances. And therein lies the problem. Why is it that you see certain signs and you think, let's keep going anyway? There's a type of false optimism that you're drawing upon that ultimately is going to get you in trouble. I spoke with somebody very recently who said, yeah, one of my problems has always been, and this is a very nice person and somebody who's super reliable. This person says, well, I know that I'm trustworthy, therefore I would just assume that you would be too. And of course, you can't make that kind of assumption. And that's what I mean when I say applying normalcy to someone who's not normal. We have such a desire for healthiness and reasonableness and decency. And then when somebody comes along and says, "Well, I don't think that way," it's like, "Well, let me show you how to do that," or "Join me. Come, I want you to do it." And part of you breaking away is realizing there are just a lot of people out there that do not have insight, and they do not have a need to adjust. They're totally satisfied with their own justifications and rationalizations. And that's where you can be with that narcissistic person. So rather than ascribing normalcy to an abnormal personality pattern, then you have to acknowledge some folks are that way. And I've mentioned this multiple times before, but I'm just going to keep repeating it. In my estimation, and keep in mind, I'm a therapist and I really like to guide people toward healthy insights. Roughly 80% of the population, in my estimation, are not inclined towards psychological insights. And it doesn't mean they're all narcissists, but they're just some folks who just like, "Well, I don't think about it that deep." Or there are others who they can see certain psychological deficiencies in their world. And instead of taking insight, it's like, well, look at you. They just, they look outward, but they hardly ever look inward. And part of my 20% versus 80% is on the Myers Briggs. I know many of you are familiar with that. I'm an ENFJ, and the N, that's the intuitive. The N is somebody that says, I like to think things through. Roughly about 27% of the population would register as an N. The opposite of that is the S, which is sensory, which means that you tend to have black and white thinking, and you're very concrete. And you don't really go into that why kind of space as deeply. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It just means that's not your inclination. And then on top of it, there are also studies about how many people actually go to therapy, and then a year later it made a real difference. And the answer there is about 30%. And those, a lot of those are some of the ends. And so, putting all that together, in my personal experience, that's how I speculate that maybe 20% really do have a deeper capacity for insight that makes a difference. So, as you're trying to break free from some of their dysfunctional patterns, keep in mind that not everybody's going to join you. It's a bit rare for you to be the kind of person you are. Be thankful that you have that ability, but then also accept reality for what it is. Some people just simply don't have insight. And as you're trying to break free, you need to acknowledge that and realize these are going to be individuals that the best you're going to have with them is going to be rather superficial. Factor that in. Okay. Um, Another question, and this one kind of gets into the overlap between narcissism and addictions. Okay. This person says, my in law has been a heavy alcoholic most of her life. Her behavior feels like narcissism. I've been married 30 years and she's never once invited me to her home. Is she just an alcohol induced narcissist? Um, let's turn that back around. Okay. Is she an alcohol induced narcissist, or is she a narcissist who has decided that yeah, alcohol absorption is something that she's quite willing to go into? And I vote for B. The narcissism comes first, and then the behavior follows. Now, the behavior can feed into it. So, over time, the narcissism can feed the addiction, and then the addiction perpetuates the narcissism. But I'm one of these that says there's a reason that somebody goes into addictive behavior before the behavior actually exists. There's something on the interior that is wrong. Uh, One of the things with respect to, let's just keep it to alcohol consumption. Um, yeah, I'm one of these that I don't drink heavily, but from time to time, if I have a drink here and there, that's fine. But the rest of the story is I'm not defined by alcohol. I'm not defined by the party attitude and all of that. And the reason is because, well, I've got other things that are part of my definition, and there are many different ingredients that go into the making of who I might be. A person who has that strong narcissistic bent doesn't have that strong interior um, uh, mentality or definition, so that when temptations come for exaggerated use of normal kinds of behaviors, they don't have anything to block them or stop them or slow them down. And so their lack of an interior sense of peace, their lack of an interior sense of well-being, can cause them to lock into behaviors and attitudes that just keep them going. And in the case of alcoholism and addictions, that's just one of the ways they display some of the selfishness or some of the lack of depth that's already in there. And so, is she just an alcoholic induced narcissist? Well, I would be inclined to say she's a narcissist who's chosen alcohol as a way to display what's on her interior. And so, again, once you see this and once you notice it, then if that individual chooses not to change, in this case, 30 years, it's like, got it. You don't have it to sell me anymore on what the situation is. I see it, and then you make adjustments accordingly. So just kind of know, again, that's what you're dealing with. And some people just simply think, well, I'm committed to my pattern, and if you want me to be committed to something else, nah, I'm not going to do it. Accept that as reality. Now this next one, and this is an interesting one because this gets kind of to the heart of why some individuals have difficulty in breaking away from that narcissistic person. This person asked, "Do you think that we may attract our past? Folks like our parents or gaslighters or critics or emotionally mature people, etc. I see similar characteristics in my ex related or relative to my parents." Okay, that's a great question. So here she is. Clearly, she's been divorced or broken up with somebody that she had an ongoing relationship with. And it's like, I went with somebody who had some very similar patterns that I was getting away from my family of origin. What's that all about? One of the reasons that you have difficulty breaking free is we tend to fall back to onto our familiar patterns. It may be that you have people that yell a lot, or you may have people that are hard rules keepers, or you may have people that show one thing publicly, but behind the scenes they're terribly hypocritical. I mean, those may be some of the patterns that you grew up with, and that became part of your familiarity, and you were just taking notes, saying, "Well, I guess that's the way people do it." And so many times when you're an adult uh, and you're trying to size up other individuals, wondering, well, is this somebody that I need to be with? If somebody comes along and they're quite different from what you grew up with, you might think to yourself, "Oh, that's appealing. I like that, but I don't know what to do with it," or that's just a little outside of my comfort zone. And so many times we just simply tend to fall back on what we know. And it's kind of like you're succumbing to the narcissist's less than flattering view of who you are. Uh, they'll point blank say, "Well, you don't deserve anything good," and sometimes you might actually think, "Well, maybe that's true. Maybe I don't deserve anything, or maybe I can't get beyond my past." And so those kinds of messages can be echoing in your mind. And as a result, when you have broken away from them, but then you're going towards someone new, it's like, well, but they're still in your mind. Uh, I just recently put out that video about the ghost that's in your own home. The narcissist may physically no longer be there with you, but the message that they have is still there on the inside of your mind. And that's where it's going to be so necessary for you to know what that message of your own destruction has been placed inside your mind, so that you can go on. Because if not, we just tend to fall back on that, on what's familiar. Now, let me give you an illustration. And this was years ago. And since then, I've talked with many international kind of people who would echo this thing. But years ago, I befriended a fellow who was from Argentina, and he was here in Texas. Actually, he came to the same university as I did, and he spoke, obviously, he spoke fluent Spanish. But when he was a late teenager, he had moved to the States. And I asked him, I said, "Well, how easy was it for you to learn English as your new language?" And he said, "Well, I've had some lessons and all when I was a kid. But once I got here, it took me about 2 years before I really got acclimated to speaking English as opposed to Spanish." And then he said, and I knew that I was all the way into being a speaker of English when I found myself not only thinking in my new language, but then I also found myself dreaming in my new language. And it was kind of an interesting insight that I had way back when you've been with a narcissist, you think in the terms that the narcissist has taught you, just like a language. And so here you are, you join Team Healthy, and it's like, I'm doing something different, but it's going to take some time for their thinking to get out of your head and for you to learn the new language of psychological wholeness, the new language of inner peace and contentment. And that's why so many times it's good just to have repetitions and classes and learning and what we're doing here, so that it's an ongoing reminder. Oh, yes, yes, yes. I used to be this way, now I'm this way. And it takes time for all of that to gel in your mind. And so this person asked, "Well, do we just tend to fall back on the familiar?" And the answer is yeah, unless you decide, but I'm learning a new language. That's what we're doing here. So as you learn that new language, then I'm hoping that boundaries and stipulations and consequences can become more and more natural as you practice your own distinctive and the self-care that goes along with it. Okay. Um, Another question here. If stupidity, that's where they can, I've used that word. If stupidity is the driving force behind a narcissist's unwillingness to improve, then why can narcissists be found in the highest levels of politics, business, healthcare, law enforcement, government, etc.? The driving force is fear. Um, so here you have somebody who says, "Well, the way I look at it, there's some people in my world that are just not that bright. They have a lot of stupidity, and they treat people wrong. They treat me wrong, and I'm trying to break away from that, but they're everywhere." And again, how is it that these people who are just downright stupid in the way that they treat people, how do they find themselves at the top of the heap in whatever their chosen profession might be? And the answer is, first, narcissists are constantly trying to figure out how to get into the position of power. And so they tend to be drawn towards positions inside whatever their chosen profession is that would allow them to be the ultimate decision maker. And so it's only natural that if there are certain types of jobs where you get to be a decision maker and an enforcer and somebody that tells people the way it is, then it's like, I'm going to get that one. And by the way, it's not just politics or business or whatever. It's everything. I mean, it can be like, how many of you have been to an organization, like a community organization, and you have this one person who's the ultimate take charge individual? It's like, well, when I'm on a committee, um, I'll be in charge there. It may be a social situation. Sometimes you have that one person. It's like, we're going to do everything the way I say. And so that's just a natural bent that they have anyway. And then when we ask, how is it that they get to the point of being in charge? Stupidity doesn't mean complete ignorance. You can still have capacity. I mean, for example, let's say that you're a CPA and there's a large group of CPAs and you're smart enough to have passed the CPA exams and all of that. And yet you can treat people poorly. Stupid in one section doesn't necessarily mean stupid in all sections. And so these individuals can actually be intelligent and they can actually have good ideas regarding certain procedures and all. And so it's a mixture there. So and by the way, most of the stupidity that's this person is implying would fall under the category of low emotional intelligence. And in other words, they don't really see into other individuals with the keen insight, or they don't really have a care to know about another person's interior in a very clean kind of way. And so we have that kind of level. And so we need to be careful not to just do this black and white, all or nothing thinking. Well, because they treat people stupid, that means everything about them is no good. Well, actually, they can actually have some skills. Some of them they don't. I can think of a few right off the top, but let's just keep in mind it's more a matter of emotional intelligence, and then, frankly, particularly when it comes to politics, you'll have a lot of other folks that have the same level of low emotional intelligence. Like, yeah, that's my person right there, and so there are all sorts of elements involved that's there, and so as you are breaking free. Keep in mind that these individuals are going to be in places of decision making, and they have their followers, and they can have the followers that think very much like them, because it's actually a very prominent kind of a theme. By the way, chasing another rabbit. I read a study. This was several years ago, and it was from a well-known university about how many people in general are attracted to authoritarian thinking, not just positions, but just they're naturally drawn toward authoritarian thinking. And this particular study came out to about 40% who are highly authoritarian, and this is the way it's got to be. And if people don't like it, you just shove it down their throat anyway. 40% is a real high percentage. And so there are a lot of people out there anyway who are inclined toward that. And so with politics and all, and if you have a constituency that they're all inclined towards that authoritarian person, and you're that person, I mean, there's so many different reasons to just know all of that. Okay. Another person asked, and this is taking it to the other side of the equation. This person, very, very simple question. This person says, what is a safe person? Okay, what is a safe person? I'm going to do I did a video on that a number of years ago. I'm going to do another one with a different angle on that. Well, okay, let's break that down. What is it about narcissism that's not safe? Well, first, they feel like they need to control you. And the implication is that means that your free choice, your independence is something that they don't like. And so a safe person is someone that says, I just don't feel the need to control you. In fact, I'd like to know who you are, and I'd like for you to feel like it's okay to think on your own. So, safe individuals will ask questions like, well, what do you think? And they actually mean it for healthy reasons, not for data gathering. Or another thing that when we ask, what is a safe person? Um, Developmental psychologists will tell us that down at the very core of having a healthy relationship, you have to have trust established. Safe people are trusting individuals, and they're trustworthy individuals. Do you know many narcissistic individuals who think like that? Or another ingredient that goes along with safeness, and this is research based, um, and that is the characteristic of conscientiousness. Conscientiousness, and I'm not going to go into it, I've done it elsewhere, is considered by many as the number one indicator of a healthy personality. And conscientiousness is a very rich term. It's a rich characteristic. It implies a sense of courtesy, anticipation. It implies forms of empathy, tuning into you and making decisions with the group involved or in their mind. It means reliability, responsibility. So when we ask what is a safe person, it's like you want to know that so that when you see someone who does not exhibit those kind of characteristics, this goes back to our theme of you need to break away from that. But in addition, I'm hoping it's like, and I'm going to be one of those safe individuals. And by the way, safe people know how to establish boundaries. They know who they are. They have a definition of what they believe wisdom to be and all the implications that go along with it. And then they select other individuals who are going to be willing to join them on that. So I think that's a great question. And I think every single one of us, as we are trying to figure out what it is about that narcissistic pattern that we don't like, that we don't just stop there, but we take it a little bit further and we ask, what's my better alternative? And that's where this question can lead us. What does it mean to be non-narcissistic? And what does it mean to be a positive rather than a negative contributor to a relationship? And as you're breaking away from these unsafe individuals, you want to make sure that you're breaking toward the cleaner alternative. So that's why I like a question like this so much. Okay. Um, this next person, and this goes back to divorce and all of that. You learn a lot about an individual's emotional maturity when there's conflict there. This person says, I was once married to a narcissist. He destroyed my childhood friendships when we divorced by talking about me behind my back. How do I explain to a friend about him without looking like I'm trying to blame him for everything? First, I'm hoping that if these are childhood friends of yours and then he's doing this back behind the scenes whisper campaign against you, I'm hoping that some of your people that have known you pretty deep will think, this is kind of different from what I know about you. And so I'm hoping some of them aren't going to buy into it in the first place. But here you have an ex. And by the way, when divorce happens, it's not at all uncommon for a person to think, well, if I'm going to divorce, then I'm going to try to take as many of our acquaintances as I can and put them on my team against you. And they want other people to hate you just like they hate you. The old saying is when somebody can't control you, then the next step is they want to control how people think about you. And that's what we have going on here. And so, how do you respond if you're with some of these friends that have been on the receiving end of some unflattering comments about you? Is it even necessary for you to speak up? And sometimes the answer is yeah. I don't want the narcissist to be the one out there just establishing the narrative, and I'm just going to be real quiet. But the key is moderation. Um, when you're talking about your history and your frustrations and difficulties with someone who turned out to be not what they purported, and you have a breakup with that person, if you come on with a whole lot of contempt or bitterness or anger or just wild and crazy emotion, people are going to pick up not on the words that you speak, but they're going to pick up on your demeanor. And so if you yell, oh, that person was such an idiot, or he's so miserable. If you had to live with him like I did, you would have to, if you just kind of do that and it's just really wild and emotionally laden, then you're not going to have much traction. You're not going to have much credibility. So there are times when a friend of yours may say, hey, I'm hearing some pretty crummy things about you. Can we talk? It's okay to speak up, but then notice your tone of voice. You can give people cues through your nonverbals about how comfortable you are about yourself. And when there's a calmness or a steadiness, and it doesn't mean that you can't register frustration, but there's a reasonableness and a moderation in who you are and how you conduct yourself. it's the nonverbals that they're going to pick up on most, more so than the actual words. And so, if you have a sense of decency or calmness, or you seem to have a certain peace about who you are, despite some of the frustrations that are whirling around you, then that's going to be your greatest argument, if you will. And again, we go back to our theme. When you're trying to break away from that narcissist, one of the things you want to do is you want to illustrate, it's not that I just think different from that person, but my entire essence is not the same. And people pick up on that, whether they realize they're doing it in the immediate sense or not. Okay, another university study, and this is a long one, and many people in my profession have referenced this one. It's about, how we leave an impact on other people through our communication, and the general gist is that about 93% of your communication is based on multiple nonverbal cues that you send, and about 7% of the way that you leave an impact on other individuals is based on the actual words that you present. And so people are going to pick up on all of the non-verbal tangentials that you bring along, as opposed to just, laying it all out. Now, sometimes it's good to lay out facts, but I think you understand, they're going to pick up on whether you have a comfort with yourself and all the rest. Okay. Um, okay. Another question a person asked, and again, this is part of what makes it difficult to break away from the narcissist. This person asked, do narcissists precipitate tension to keep people dysregulated and off balance? What do you think? And it's like 100% yes. We call it gaslighting, and it's one of the characteristics or the tools that narcissists use, and that it's like they just can't stop themselves. Uh, Narcissists themselves carry a great deal of turmoil on the inside. They're unhappy individuals. They're not tuned into what true peace is or love. I've identified narcissism as an absence of love. Also, narcissism is an absence of true integrity. And so these are individuals that have their own internal junk that they've not come to terms with. And so what they'll do is they'll project their unfinished business onto you. And then they'll turn around and say, you sure are a messed up person, or you sure are somebody that it seems confused. You have anger issues, you have control issues, or you've got so many problems that you've never come to terms with, or whatever their accusation is. And so much of it is a projection of their own stuff that they won't come to terms with. So do narcissists precipitate tension to keep people dysregulated and off balance? It's like, yeah, that way we don't have to talk about me and all my dysregulation. It is classic gaslighting. It's classic projection. It's what narcissists do, one of the things that narcissists do the most. And so part of your breaking away from that narcissist is to know, okay, well, I've been trained through the years to doubt myself and to doubt my own ideas or interpretations or opinions. I think I'm going to stop doing that. I think I'm going to go ahead and think, well, if this is me talking, it's not like I'm right every single time, but I'm going to give me some credibility. And if the narcissist comes along and says, well, I'm not too sure about that, it's like, yeah, I realize you're not too sure about a whole lot of things relative to me, aren't you? But that's where you are. I don't filter my thoughts through you anymore. And that's how you get to the point to where you have that greater independence, because they want you to stay off balance, because that just keeps them from having to deal with their own unfinished business. Okay, now I've got another one here, and this one goes to the question of confronting in a situation, and how do you go about doing this? This person says, "My 50th wedding anniversary is coming up soon, and for me, it is not a celebration of anything other than a life of constant manipulation and narcissistic abuse." All right, let's just stop right there. I'm so sorry that there's some individuals in this person's case, 50 years of it, that you've just kind of had to stay with it. And some folks will say, well, you should have just walked away years ago. Well, again, we go back and say there can be reasons why that just wasn't a workable situation. And so I'm not going to fault somebody for saying, well, here I am this many years deep into it. But this person is saying, How can I suffer through any party my kids might put on for us? I'm very bad at faking happiness. It's going to be constant stress for me until that day comes and goes. Would you have any suggestions? Now, I don't know if that 50th anniversary is next week or 6 months from now. It's okay as the mom to say to your kids, okay, you've been married 50 years. Let's say you have two kids that are 45 and 40. Let's just say that. I don't want to have a party. It's okay to say that. And I know that in most cases, you have a nice punch bowl with good refreshments and all of that. And you give nice gifts and cards and sing for He's a Jolly Good Fellow or Let Me Call You Sweetheart or something. But it's okay to say to your own adult kids, that's not something I prefer to do. I know that that is something that many people do celebrate, but it's been a difficult ride. And so, if you don't mind, I'd like for us to just simply have let me and my and your dad have a quiet evening. And if you go out to dinner with your husband, I don't know if you're going to even go that far. Say it. Just go ahead and say it. And if they say, "But mom, we just want everybody wants to get together," and it's like, I know, but this is not for you. This is for me and your dad, and we're just not at that right place. And I think there comes a point to where you find yourself being in a position where you almost feel required to be dishonest so that you can keep everybody else happy. And I'm going to guess that this woman who's asking this question has had many other episodes of other natures where they can't break away or they can't establish themselves as too distinct because it would require an honesty that other people don't want to come to terms with. At some point, just be honest anyway. And so and I've had so many variations where deep into a relationship, there are just some patterns that have been there for a long time, and nobody seems to want to come to terms with it. But the healthier you get, the more you can say, I don't want to participate in that anymore. And then you stand your ground. And then when they try to talk you out of it, you stand your ground anyway. So, let me do one more question, okay? Because I know there's so many of them here. This person says, oh, and this one's going to also go to another thing about confrontation. Dr. C, how can I cope with my controlling mother in law who always tries to play the role of being so loving and caring, but when no one else is watching, she's cold and dismissive toward me? She will also comment really nice things on my Facebook post, but won't ever even say these nice things about my happiness or my achievements in real life. What do I do? And see, this is another one where you're being played. This is gaslighting again. And you're saying, I don't want to have anything to do with it. I wish she'd just quit. Well, apparently she's not going to quit because that's just who she is. But I think it's okay. I mean, what have you got to lose to say to your mother-in-law? I've noticed that you've put some nice and flattering things about me on Facebook, or I've noticed that when other people around, you can give me a nice gift or say something complimentary. But I've also noticed that when no one is looking, you seem to change your tune, and you seem to have an attitude towards me that's very dismissive, and it leaves me feeling conflicted. But it also leaves me thinking that some of that niceness is more for public show than it being authentic. And so I'd rather you just lay off of the post on Facebook, or I'd prefer that you lay off some of these compliments when everybody else is around. When I know that behind the scenes it doesn't seem to be that way, and you know that that mother-in-law is going to think, "What? You think that I'm that way?" And the answer is, "Yeah, I do. Yeah, right." And say it. Just go ahead and put it out there. And it's like, well, I never have been so insulted in my life. And you're thinking, well, you ought to live and be insulted like I've been. Then you know what it's like. It's like you can think whatever you want. At some point, you just put it out there, as opposed to, oh, I'll just go along to get along. Because in doing so, you just get that much more tied to them. But worse, your emotional disposition becomes so dysregulated and you stay connected through your lousy emotions. And so sometimes you just need to be assertive and you need to say, stop it. So I vote for that. And it can be done. Notice again my tone of voice. You don't have to be mean and you don't have to defend when she comes back. It's like, well, that's just my position. And then it's going to be awkward, but it's already awkward. Speak up. So when we know that there are times that the narcissist is just going to be difficult and you know that you need to break away, it's going to be hard. It's going to be awkward because you're wanting to bring decency to an indecent set of circumstances. You're wanting to bring a form of normalcy to an abnormal person. And so it's just not going to be a good mix. That being the case, do what you know is wisest and best for yourself and know that you're trying to be that safe person. And then when the narcissist says, I don't agree with that, it's like, that's predictable. But I agree with who I am, and then stand up on it. Okay. All right, guys, thanks so much for your questions. For those of you who are new, just put your questions in the comments section and I'll pick up on them and we'll pick up some more of this time next week and continue on. I so appreciate you being the encouragers that you are to one another, to me, and I appreciate you allowing me to be on your journey with you. I wish you peace as you go into the week ahead of you, and I will see you same time next week. Bye, everybody.